Imagine sitting alone in your quiet kitchen, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's holding all the years of hard work and sacrifice you've lived through. That was me, Eleanor Hayes, on a cold night in Boise. I was going over a pile of hospital bills, saving every dollar I could for knee surgery. That surgery meant everything to me, a chance to walk without pain, to get back to my little herb garden outside, the one I planted with my late husband, Walter. I could see the frost on the leaves through the window, and I thought of him, his old coffee tin still sitting on the counter, just like he left it. Even after 8 years, that dented tin reminded me of the love we shared. Then the phone rang. I smiled when I saw it was my son, Jeremy. He's 34 now, but to me, he'll always be the boy I raised alone after Walter died. I picked up, expecting to hear about my granddaughter, Sophie, or just a quick check-in. Instead, his voice came through, all excited. "Mom, I took the money from your account for a poker tournament in Vegas. Huge payout. When I win, you'll be proud." My heart dropped. That was the $9,500 I'd been saving for my surgery, money I'd worked 18 months to scrape together. I froze, gripping the phone, trying to stay calm. "You took the surgery money?" I asked. And then he laughed. Like it was no big deal. "Relax, Mom. It's an investment." Before I could say anything, I heard Leah, his wife, in the background. "She's old, Jeremy. She doesn't need that surgery. Let her stay home." And then Jeremy, my own son, said softly, "Yeah, babe, I'll handle everything." I dropped the teacup in my hand. It shattered on the floor, little white pieces everywhere, just like my heart in that moment. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. Was I just a burden to him now? Just a source of money? The phone was still pressed to my ear. As he ended the call, "Gotta go, plane's boarding. Love you." And just like that, the line went dead. I sat there in shock, staring at the broken cup on the floor. The kitchen felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Outside, the garden blurred through my tears. All the nights I stayed up late, budgeting to pay for his college, the times I skipped meals to make ends meet, the weekends I babysat Sophie. So he and Leah could go out, I thought it all meant something. I thought he saw me. Loved me. But that laugh, and Leah's cruel words, it all hit me like a punch to the chest. Then, out of nowhere, I noticed an old text on my phone. Jeremy had forwarded it to me months ago by accident. It was a message to Leah: "I don't want Mom finding out about the $7,000 I lost last year. Keep it quiet, babe." I just stared at the screen, my hands trembling. And for the first time, I wondered, had I spent my whole life loving someone who didn't really see me at all? $7,000, gone. Jeremy had gambled it away and never told me. What else had he hidden? I stood up slowly, my knee aching badly as I walked to the sink. I let the cold water run over my hands, hoping it would help with the pain in my chest too. My eyes drifted to the old coffee tin sitting on the counter, Walter's tin. Still there, still solid. He used to tell me I was stronger than I thought. Maybe now was the time to find out if he was right. What would you do if the person you trusted most turned your love and sacrifice into something to laugh about? Share your thoughts, because this story, my story, is far from over. And believe me, I'm not done yet. That night dragged on, long and heavy. I couldn't sleep, so I wrapped myself in an old wool shawl and went out to the herb garden behind the house. The air smelled like mint and basil, sharp and fresh. Their leaves shimmered silver under the full moon hanging low over Boise. My knee throbbed, but I didn't want to go back inside, not yet. That kitchen, with the broken teacup and hospital bills, felt like a prison now. A place where everything I'd built with love had come crashing down. The $9,500 I'd worked so hard to save for surgery? Gone. Tossed into a poker game like it. Meant nothing. And worse than that, the sound of Jeremy's laugh, still ringing in my ears. Leah's cold voice repeating in my mind, "She's old. She doesn't need that surgery." I pulled the shawl tighter, the scratchy fabric rubbing my skin, and stared at the garden Walter and I had planted together. It was more than just plants, it was the last real piece of him I had. And maybe the last real piece of me too. The wind blew gently, making the basil leaves rustle. I leaned forward, resting my hands in the cool, damp soil. Walter had taught me everything about that garden, how to trim rosemary just right, how to care for each plant with patience and love. After he passed, I kept it going. I poured all my sadness, all my missing him, into this little patch of green. Whenever Jeremy's calls started to fade, or when his visits became quick and hollow, I'd come here. I came here after Leah started with her comments, little jabs that stung more than she knew. But even the garden couldn't quiet the storm. Inside me now. I picked a mint leaf and crushed it between my fingers. The sharp scent hit my nose, and tears welled in my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. My mind pulled me back through the years, like flipping through old photo albums I didn't want to see. I remembered being 30, a single mom in a tiny apartment. Jeremy would sleep in the next room while I sat under a flickering lamp, going over bills. I worked at the bank, my fingers flying across the typewriter, my back aching from long shifts. I skipped dinners, sold my mother's silver brooch, anything to make sure Jeremy had what he needed. I paid $20,000 for his college tuition, telling myself it was an investment in his future. I thought it meant something. I thought it made us closer. I thought it built a bond he'd never break. But maybe I was wrong. Over time, Jeremy began asking for more money. First it was small things. Then it was $15,000 for a real estate business he said would change his life. I gave it, picturing him building a better world for Sophie, my granddaughter. Instead, he bought a fancy black car, flashy, expensive, useless. I shifted on the bench, my knee flaring with pain, and thought of Sophie. She's 5 now. Bright-eyed, gap-toothed, and full of life. She loves my tomato soup and lets me braid her hair while she colors. I've spent so many mornings with her, waking up early to watch her, cook for her, play with her. Jeremy and Leia would drop her off like it was nothing, barely saying hello. Leia would come to pick her up later, barely hiding her judgment. Too rustic, Eleanor. You should try something more modern. I'd smile and swallow the sting. Pretend it didn't matter. But it did. All those little put-downs, every time they brushed me off, added up, one on top of the other, until they felt like heavy stones sitting on my chest. And then there was the gambling. I'd already bailed Jeremy out once, $5,000 to cover some casino debt he swore was a one-time mistake. He hugged me tight, called me his rock, promised he'd pay it back. That was 3 years ago. I'm still waiting. Even when my best friend Thelma warned me, I didn't listen. Jeremy's not the boy you raised, she said, kind but honest. You're giving too much, Eleanor. I shook my head, told her a mother's love doesn't keep score. But tonight, under this cold moon and surrounded by everything I'd held on to, I started to wonder, had she been right all along? I looked down at the crushed mint in my hand, its sticky juice clinging to my skin. And I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding: had I raised a son who only saw me as someone to use, someone to take from, over and over again? I felt hollow, like Jeremy had taken everything from me and left nothing behind. That thought hit hard, twisting in my gut like something sharp. I loved him, God, I loved that boy, with every part of me. But now, that love felt more like a cage than a bond. I wanted to scream, to pick up the phone and demand answers. Ask how he could laugh while ripping my heart open. How Leia could speak about me like I was just some useless old woman. But I wasn't ready to face him, not yet. Still, something inside me had shifted. That little spark I felt in the garden. The night before, the one whispering, "What if you've been loving the wrong version of your son all this time?" It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was getting louder. I stood, my bad knee giving a familiar ache, and walked slowly back into the house. The kitchen was dark, and the broken teacup still lay scattered across the floor. I didn't have the energy to sweep it up. I just stepped over the pieces and picked up my phone. There it was, another message thread I hadn't seen before. A months-old text Jeremy had accidentally forwarded to me, buried in one of our old chats about Sophie's school. It read, "Don't let Mom know about the 10 grand I owe the casino." And Leia had replied with her usual cold confidence, "I'll handle it." My breath caught. $10,000. Another secret. Another lie. And always Leia, whispering behind the scenes, pulling the strings I hadn't even known existed. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. I looked at Walter's coffee tin, still sitting on the counter, still reminding me of mornings. Filled with his humming and kindness. I reached for it, the cool metal pressing into my palm. Walter used to tell me I had fire in me. Fire strong enough to burn through anything. As I held that tin, I started to believe maybe he was right. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust. About all the years I'd poured into raising Jeremy, about the woman I'd let myself become, quiet, giving, always putting everyone else first. Maybe it was time to stop giving. Maybe it was time to take something back. I glanced out the window. The moonlight bathed the garden in silver, the basil and mint leaves gently swaying. The night was cold, but I didn't feel alone anymore. Not really. I felt something waking up inside me. The next morning, I sat in the Boise Community Library, a warm cup of coffee in my hands. The room smelled like old books and fresh ink, comforting, familiar. I'd spent years here, running book drives and reading to children. This place had been my safe haven. But today, the warmth of the room couldn't melt the chill in my chest. Jeremy's betrayal. Leia's voice. That casino debt. It all hung on me like a wet coat I couldn't take off. Across from me sat Thelma, my rock since Walter's funeral. Her gray curls caught the sunlight as she flipped through a worn-out copy of Jane Eyre. She looked up and narrowed her eyes. You look like you haven't slept in a week, Eleanor, she said, her voice steady. Spill it. I smiled, weak and tight, but she wasn't buying it. Thelma knew me too well. She'd seen every tear I'd shed over Jeremy, listened to every late-night call when he let me down. I wanted to tell her everything, how he took the surgery money for poker, how Leah had called me old and useless, but the words caught in my throat. Shame tangled them up. Before I could speak, my phone buzzed on the table. A text from Jeremy. Just 5 cold words. Hey mom, can you watch Sophie this week while I'm in Vegas? Thanks. No apology. No mention of the money he stole. Just another request like I was a babysitter on standby. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. Part of me wanted to reply. Part of me wanted to scream. But most of me just wanted to finally stop being the person who always said yes. Thelma leaned over, glanced at the text, and snorted. He's got some nerve. You're not his maid, Eleanor. I nodded, but Jeremy's words still sat heavy on me. He expected me to say yes. Like I always had. He thought I would just keep giving, without question, without limits. And then, the library door creaked open. My stomach turned. Leah stepped in. She looked polished as ever, hair neatly pulled back, holding a wicker basket of cookies. Her smile was soft, but it didn't reach her eyes. She walked over like she was floating on air and set the basket on the table. Eleanor, she said, her voice dripping with syrup. I'm so sorry about the other night. I didn't mean to sound harsh. I was just worried about you. Thelma raised one eyebrow so high I thought it might disappear into her hairline. But I just sat there, still, my hands clenched in my lap beneath the table. Oatmeal and cinnamon filled the air from the cookies. I didn't touch them. Because Leah's words might have sounded sweet, but I hadn't forgotten the way they cut like knives. Leah sat right beside me, her strong, flowery perfume making my nose sting. I wanted to believe what she was saying, to trust that she really meant it. But I couldn't forget what I'd overheard on the phone days ago, her voice, cold and careless, saying, she's old. She doesn't need that surgery. Just remembering it made my skin crawl. I muttered something about needing a drink of water and slowly walked into the library's little kitchen, my bad knee throbbing with every step. The door swung shut behind me, but I stayed there, resting my hand on the counter to keep steady. Through the thin wall, I could hear Leah talking on her phone again. Her voice was low and quick. Jeremy's going all in on this tournament, she said. If he wins, we're set. If he loses, his mom will cover it. She always does. My breath caught in my throat. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. Then her voice dropped even lower. Once we get her to sign over the house, we can sell it. That old place is worth a fortune. I froze. My hand pressed to my chest, shaking. My house. The home Walter and I had worked our whole lives for. The one with the herb garden in the back and the old coffee tin on the counter. Leah wasn't just hoping to take my surgery money, she was after everything. I leaned harder against the counter. The cool metal helped me stay upright while her words hit me like bricks. She'd been planning this for a long time, pushing Jeremy into risky bets, knowing I'd swoop in to save him like I always did. All to trap me into giving up my home. And Jeremy, my own son. Was he letting her do this? Or worse, was he part of it? I walked back to the table, trying to keep my face calm even though my heart was racing. Leah was still there, smiling like nothing had happened, chatting about Sophie's school as if she hadn't just betrayed me. I nodded politely, keeping my hands folded tight, and offered her a cookie. She took one, smiling, completely unaware that I now knew the truth. Thelma sat nearby, her eyes bouncing between me and Leah. She could tell something was off. After Leah left, saying she'd call me later about Sophie, Thelma grabbed my arm. You need to talk to Roland, she said, serious. He's a lawyer. A good one. You can't let them do this to you. I walked home in a daze, the streets of Boise quiet under the pale spring sky. My knee was aching, but the real pain was in my chest. Leah's voice kept echoing in my head. If he loses, his mom will cover it. She always does. When I got home, the familiar creak of the door grounded me. I headed straight to my bedroom and opened the closet. There was Jeremy's old jacket, the one he left behind last winter. I'd meant to return it. My hand shook as I reached into the pockets, hoping, just maybe, I was wrong. But I wasn't. There it was, a crumpled-up receipt from a Vegas casino. $10,000 owed. And on the back, in Leah's handwriting, keep this for me. I sat down hard on the bed, the receipt in my lap, my breath shallow. My home, my garden, my memories, they were all just part of some plan to take everything from me. Leah hadn't just been using Jeremy. She was breaking me down, piece by piece. And I'd been too blind to see it. But now I did. That small spark I'd felt in the garden last night, the quiet doubt about the people I loved, had burst into something bigger. Not just anger, but determination. I wasn't the fool. They thought I was. Not anymore. I stood, my knees shaky, and walked into the kitchen. Walter's old coffee tin was still there on the counter, exactly where he always kept it. I touched it, feeling a fire grow inside me. Leia thought she had me backed into a corner. She didn't. No me. Not really. Not yet. Later that night, I sat across from Roland in his small law office downtown. The clock struck midnight, its soft chime echoing around us. Papers were scattered across his desk, and a flickering lamp cast long shadows on the wall. The city outside was quiet and still, but inside me, a storm was raging. I told him everything, about the casino receipt, the note from Leia, and the plan to take my house. $9,500 of my surgery money was already gone, gambled away. And now my home, the place Walter and I had poured our lives into, was at risk. But for the first time in years, I wasn't scared. Roland, a kind-looking man with sharp eyes, slid a folder toward me. The contract you found? It's a fake, Eleanor, he said, tapping the page. Jeremy tried to use your house as loan collateral. But without your signature, it means nothing. I nodded, my jaw tight. That crumpled receipt was still in my purse, a quiet, cruel reminder of Jeremy's betrayal. And Leia's words, if he loses, his mom will cover it, kept pushing me forward. She thought I'd break. That I'd cave, like always. But she was wrong. I need to protect what's mine, I said quietly, but firmly. Roland nodded, already writing notes. We can lock down your accounts, he said. Remove their access. Make sure they can't touch a thing. And just like that, I took my first step toward taking my life back. Roland looked at me kindly and said, we can cancel Jeremy's access and shut down any joint credit lines. I can also help you write a new will if you want to change where your things go. I thought about my little herb garden, the creaky wooden floors, and Walter's old coffee tin still sitting on the counter. That house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was my life. It was proof that I'd made it through. I looked at Roland and said, do it all. By 1 a.m, it was done. Jeremy couldn't touch my bank accounts anymore. The credit cards he liked to use like a safety net were shut down. I signed a new will too, this time leaving my house and savings to a local charity for women over 60. Women like me, who gave so much and got so little in return. Roland handed me the paperwork, his expression soft and full of respect. You're doing the right thing, he said. I held the folder close and stood up slowly. My knee ached, but the pain felt far away. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of Jeremy's choices. When I got home, the kitchen was dark. The broken teacup from that first awful night still lay in pieces on the floor. I sat at the table, picked up my phone, and called Jeremy. I knew he'd answer. Even though it was late. He was probably still in Vegas, full of big dreams and bright lights. Mom, he said, his voice thick with casino noise. What's up? I took a slow breath, keeping my voice calm and warm, like I used to when he was little. I'm sending you $5,000, I said. For the tournament. Use it wisely. He laughed, relieved. You're the best, Mom. I knew you'd come through. I hung up, my fingers cold. That $5,000? It was a lie. A setup. A way to push his spending just over the limit, on a credit line I'd already closed. By morning, his cards would be useless. His accounts locked tight. I leaned back in my chair, the old wood creaking beneath me, and felt a strange kind of calm. This wasn't about revenge. It was quiet, controlled, like a blade sliding into place without a sound. The next evening, my phone lit up with Jeremy's name. I didn't answer. I was outside in the garden, trimming my basil. He left a message, his voice panicked. Mom, something's wrong with the accounts. I can't get into anything. Call me back. I deleted the message without flinching. An hour later, a car came screeching into my driveway. I heard footsteps, then pounding on the front door. Eleanor. Open up. Leia's voice shrieked. Jeremy stood behind her, pale and wide-eyed under the porch light. Mom, we need to talk, he said, panic dripping from his voice. I opened the door. My shawl pulled tightly around me. I looked them both in the eye. Leia's makeup was smudged from crying, but her jaw was set hard. You froze the accounts, she snapped. You're tearing this family apart. I turned to Jeremy, waiting for him to say something. He didn't. Just stood there staring at the ground, hands stuffed in his pockets. I crossed my arms. My voice came out cold and steady, like the Boise night around us. I found the contract, Jeremy, the one where you tried to use my house for a loan. Leia flinched, but I kept going. I know about the $10,000 you owe. And I know about Leia's plan to sell my house. Jeremy's head snapped up, his eyes wide. What contract? He asked, looking at Leia in shock. She grabbed his arm, her voice rising. She's lying, babe. She's trying to break us up. I stepped Forward, my knee holding firm. I heard you, Leia. In the library. You said I'd cover Jeremy's losses. You said my house would be yours. Her mouth opened and closed, tears welling up again. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I thought of Walter's coffee tin, my garden, the life they'd tried to take from me. Jeremy's shoulders slumped. I didn't know about the house, Mom, he said, barely more than a whisper. I swear. Leia turned on him, her tears gone in a flash. You're pathetic, she snapped, pushing past him toward the car. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, and felt a sharp pain in my chest. But it passed quickly. Then Leia spun back around, fury in her eyes. You think you're so smart? She spat. Jeremy's not even your real son. He's Walter's, some woman he was with before you. I froze. My breath caught. But I didn't look away. Whether he's mine by blood or not, I said, my voice like steel, he's not my burden anymore. Leia stormed off. Jeremy followed behind her, silent and broken. The car tore out of the driveway and disappeared into the night. I closed the door with shaking hands and sank into my kitchen chair. Her words cut deep, but they didn't break me. I had loved Jeremy like my own. I had given him everything. Even if Jeremy wasn't my son by blood, that didn't make the betrayal any easier. It still hurt. I rested my hand on the folder Roland had given me, solid and real. My house was safe. My future belonged to me now. And for the first time in years, I felt free. 3 months had passed since that night on my porch, when Leia's hateful words about Jeremy's birth cut through the cool Boise air. The sting was still there, sure, but it didn't control me anymore. Now I stood in my herb garden, the August sun warming my face. The scent of basil and rosemary wrapped around me like a soft hug. My knees still ached, the surgery had been delayed after Jeremy stole $9,500 of my savings, but I moved with a kind of purpose I hadn't felt in ages. The garden was blooming, full and green. It was living proof of what I could grow when I stopped giving everything to everyone else. Inside the house, Walter's old coffee tin sat on the kitchen counter like always. Just seeing it made me feel steady, like I could keep going. I'd gone back to the Boise Community Book Club too, where the smell of old pages and fresh coffee greeted me like an old friend. I even started helping kids learn to read, guiding their tiny fingers along the lines of adventure books. Their laughter filled spaces in my heart I didn't know were empty. The library buzzed with quiet joy, soft voices, clinking mugs, and the sound of pages turning. And for the first time in months, I truly felt like I belonged. Thelma was there. Of course, her gray curls bouncing as she set up a book drive. Her eyes softened when they met mine. She never said, "I told you so," about Jeremy, but she didn't have to. Just being there was enough. She'd been right, and I was finally learning how to listen. My days began to fall into a rhythm. Mornings in the garden, afternoons at the library, and evenings with a notebook. I called it my journal, but really, it was more like a map, showing all the scars I'd collected over the years. From losing Walter to everything that happened with Jeremy, I wrote it all down. It felt like weeding a garden, pulling up the pain to make room for something new. I wrote about the night I broke the teacup. The crumpled casino receipt with Leia's handwriting. The fake contract Jeremy tried to use to take my house. I even wrote about Leia's final blow, how Jeremy wasn't really my son by blood, and how, in the end, it didn't change the love I'd given him. My writing was messy, raw, honest. But it was mine. One afternoon, I found a letter tucked between the usual bills and grocery flyers. My heart stopped when I saw the handwriting. Jeremy's, uneven, rushed. I stood in the kitchen, tracing the edges of the envelope. A part of me wanted to toss it into the fireplace and watch it turn to ash. But another part, the part that still remembered his little boy laugh, needed to know. I sat at the table, sunlight catching the metal lid of Walter's coffee tin, and opened the letter. "Mom, I'm sorry," he wrote. "Leia pushed me into gambling, but I let her. I messed up. I want to make it right." I set the letter down. My chest was tight. His words sounded honest, but I'd heard them before. $5,000 to pay a debt. $15,000 for a fake business that turned out to be a car. Empty promises. So I wrote him back, my pen steady. "Words aren't enough, Jeremy," I said. "Show me with actions." And I mailed it. Not because I suddenly trusted him, but because it felt good to finally draw the line. Leia was gone, or so Jeremy said. She'd left him, just like she'd planned to leave me, with nothing. She took her sharp tongue, her lies, and disappeared. She left Sophie behind. I thought about Sophie, her gap-toothed grin, the way she slurped tomato soup every Sunday. One day, Jeremy texted, asking if Sophie could visit. I agreed. But only for her. We met at the park near my house. The grass was soft beneath our feet, the air warm with the end of summer. Sophie ran to me, arms open wide, and I knelt, ignoring the pain in my knee, to hug her tight. Her hair smelled like strawberries, and for a moment, I wasn't a woman carrying years of hurt. I was just her grandma. I showed her how to plant mint, her tiny hands digging in the dirt, her laughter bright as sunshine. Jeremy sat on a nearby bench, quiet and pale. When Sophie ran off to the swings, I walked over to him. "I'm not here for you," I said, keeping my eyes on her. "She's my granddaughter. But you? You're not my responsibility anymore." The book club had become my anchor. My home base. Thelma organized a charity read-aloud event to raise money for a local women's shelter and asked me to read something. I hesitated. My journal was personal, too personal. But Thelma gave me that knowing look and said gently, "You've got something to say, Eleanor. Let them hear it." And I knew she was right. I stood at the front of the room, my hands shaking, and began to read. The passage was about the night I froze Jeremy's accounts, the moment I finally chose peace for myself instead of dealing with his constant mess. At first, my voice wobbled. But then it steadied. I spoke clearly, each word carrying years of pain, strength, and survival. When I finished, the room was completely silent. Then, a woman with white hair, just like mine, stood up and began clapping. Others joined in. She walked across the room and gently held my hand. "You made me feel less alone," she said, her eyes full of tears. I nodded, my throat tight, and realized something: I wasn't alone either. Later, while I was helping Thelma stack chairs, I found an old notebook in my bag. It was the one I used for writing garden notes. Tucked inside was something I hadn't seen in years, a page from Walter's old journal. His handwriting, bold and slightly messy, filled the paper. "Jeremy isn't my son by blood," he'd written, "but you've given him a mother's love. If he ever hurts you, don't let him take your light." I pressed the note to my chest, my eyes filling with tears. Walter had known the truth all along and kept it from me to protect me. Reading his words felt like he was reaching through time, steadying me when I needed it most. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars. The Boise streets were quiet. My knee ached, but the pain felt distant. The garden was waiting for me. The herbs swayed gently in the breeze, and I knelt down to touch the mint Sophie had planted. My heart wasn't full of anger or sadness anymore, it was filled with something softer, something healing. Maybe I had lost Jeremy forever. But in the mess, I had found something else, myself. It had been a year since that cold night when I stood on the porch and faced Jeremy and Leia's harsh words. The garden behind my house was blooming now, full of mint and rosemary reaching toward the morning sun. The scent floated through the air like a quiet promise that things could still grow. I stood there with soil on my hands, my bad knee holding up better than it had in a long time. The $9,500 Jeremy had taken for that Vegas poker game was gone, and I still couldn't afford the surgery. But somehow, I'd gained something even more important: my own strength. This might be the end of my story, but it also feels like a new beginning. I'd love to know, what would you do if you had to choose between your peace and your family? Tell me in the comments. Inside my kitchen, the wooden table still had the same old scratches. Walter's coffee tin sat on the counter like it always did, like a quiet guard watching over things. I had published a small book, just a little memoir called Under the Cold Moonlight. It was made up of journal entries about Jeremy's betrayal and how I slowly took my life back. The Boise Community Book Club even sold it at their spring fair. The money went to a charity for women over 60, women like me, who had given too much for too long. The book wasn't fancy, just my honest words, about the teacup I smashed in anger, the fake contract Jeremy had tricked me with, and the awful truth Leia revealed, that Jeremy wasn't my biological son. Writing it was like weeding my garden, pulling out the pain to let something better grow. One June morning, while I was trimming basil, a car pulled into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept working, my hands steady. Jeremy stepped out. Sophie was with him, her smile still gap-toothed and as bright as ever. He held a small envelope. His shoulders were slumped. He looked older than his 35 years. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the gate, keeping it closed. Sophie ran up and hugged my legs. I knelt down, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I brought you something, Grandma," she said, handing me a crayon drawing of a garden with mint leaves colored in green. I smiled and tucked it into my pocket. Then I looked at Jeremy. He held out the envelope and spoke quietly. "It's $2,000, Mom," he said. "It's not much, but I'm trying. I want to make things right." I took the envelope. It felt light in my hand, but it meant something. Months earlier, I had read his letter, where he apologized for everything, letting Leia convince him to gamble, taking my surgery money, and nearly losing me my house. I told him back then that words weren't enough. Now, he was trying to show me with actions. But broken trust doesn't heal overnight. I'll see Sophie once a month, I said, keeping my voice calm. We'll cook together, plant some herbs. But you and we're not there yet. Jeremy looked down and nodded. I get it, he said. I'll keep trying. He turned back to the car. Sophie waved goodbye as they drove off. I stood by the gate, the envelope still in my hand, a quiet ache in my chest. Jeremy wasn't my son by blood. Leia had made sure I knew that. But I had raised him. I loved him. I stayed up all night when he was sick, scraped together rent when we were broke. That love still lived inside me. But it didn't control me anymore. I had given enough. Now, I was giving to myself. That evening, the book club was holding their summer read aloud. The library glowed with string lights. Lemonade and cookies filled the tables. And for the first time in a long while, I felt ready, not just to be there, but to belong. The cookies were perfect. Thelma had really outdone herself. Her gray curls bounced as she moved around the room, greeting people with a big smile. Her laugh filled the space like music, making everything feel cozy and alive. I wore my nicest sweater, the one Walter always loved, and stood at the podium with my little book in hand. The room wasn't packed, but the faces were kind. Some I'd known for years here in Boise, and a few were new, curious strangers who had become part of this chapter in my life. I read a passage about the night I locked Jeremy's accounts, the moment I chose my own future over the chaos he brought into my life. My voice was calm and steady. Every word I spoke felt like another step away from the pain and toward freedom. When I finished, the room clapped. A woman with white hair walked up to me. Her hand shook as she reached for mine. Your story is mine too, she said softly. Thank you for telling it. Later, I walked home under a sky full of stars. The Boise air was cool and still. It felt peaceful, like the city was letting me catch my breath. When I got to my mailbox, I found a letter, not from Jeremy this time, but from the women's charity I'd chosen in my will. Your new will ensures your home will support women like you, it said. We're grateful. I smiled and folded the letter carefully. My old house, with its creaky floors and little herb garden, would keep living even after I was gone. It would help women find the strength to start over, just like I had. It felt right, like everything had come full circle. Back inside, I placed the letter next to Walter's old coffee tin. Its dented metal caught the kitchen light, still holding pieces of him. I had found one last note from him months ago, tucked inside the lid when I was cleaning. Eleanor, he'd written, if Jeremy ever hurts you, live for yourself. I love you. Those words had stayed with me, a soft whisper from the past that gave me courage when I felt weak. I ran my fingers over the tin, my heart feeling full, but light, like a cloud floating in a gentle breeze. Jeremy's $2,000 was a beginning, not a fix. Sophie's crayon drawing of our garden was a glimpse of a future I'd still be part of. But this moment, right now, this quiet, beautiful life, was mine. I stepped outside. The garden glowed under the moonlight, the leaves swaying gently as if whispering secrets in the wind. I looked up at the sky, the stars stretched endlessly above me, and I smiled. I wasn't waiting for someone else to come save me anymore. I had saved myself. Let me know in the comments, what does this ending mean to you? Have you ever had to let go of something or someone to finally find your peace?